Kenton, Professor Stein, and Mr. Chase. It's my honor to be here to host to be the chair of your presentation. And Kenton Chase is going to present his thesis titled Media Liberalization and Democracy, the Case of Radio Broadcasting in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we are very happy to know that, and everyone has already read your paper. And before you get started, I just want to know, do you have anything to say? No?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Chen, and good evening, everyone. I want to thank you very much for agreeing to be part of this panel. I want to tell you that your presence here means a lot to me. I selected you after a lot of careful thought and consideration. I know the weather is bad outside, but you still made it here, and I'm very appreciative of your effort. So my thesis, I'm proposing to write a thesis on media liberalization and democracy, the case of radio broadcasting in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Obviously, I think the first question in your mind is why this topic? Well, one, radio in St. Vincent and the Grenadines was liberalized in 1997. And since then, the country has moved from a situation where there was one radio station owned by the state to where there are 12 radio stations, 11 of which are privately owned, whether by individuals, corporations, or organizations. However, notwithstanding these realities, there's no framework outside of the legal requirements in terms of what a company needs, the laws as they relate to setting up a radio station, not in terms of the operation of a radio station. And I thought it would be interesting and important to compare these realities to what theories about media and democracy has to say about the situation as it obtains in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And maybe this is not something that you might have heard from a candidate before, but as a citizen of a small developing country, I think it is also part of my civic responsibility to contribute to the body of knowledge as it relates to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The significance of this study, this study is significant for four main reasons. The first being that it offers a detailed examination of the relationship between the liberalization of radio and democratic practices in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Secondly, it considers how oral traditions, the proliferation of call-in radio, cell phone accessibilities, and rates have facilitated the movement of information into the public sphere. Thirdly, this thesis is important because it investigates the extent to which differences in media ownership, vision, mission, and political sympathies have translated into a variety in the coding of information disseminated to the public and choices for listeners to radio in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And finally, this thesis would investigate the extent to which changes in radio access and choices have impacted on the public sphere in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Excuse me. In terms of the theoretical framework, I would examine the situation within the context of liberal pluralism. And liberal pluralism theorizes that a multiplicity of ownership would lead to greater variety in media content, and it would limit the extent to which state can influence or control the media. So in essence, what that means is that the more owners you have of media, the less is the state's ability, or the less is the influence of the state on control of media production and media content. Secondly, this theory says that competition among media owners should lead to more choice and improve quality media content. And why this is so? Because in a system, in a capitalist system, everybody is competing for the scarce advertising dollar. And therefore, the way to attract more advertisement to your media house is to improve your content, which in turn is likely to attract more listeners. And some of the theorists, some of the thinkers, the writers, media specialists, who written on this. Keane, 1991, McQuail, 2005, and Ashkell in 1984. And some interesting quotes from these thinkers. McQuail, in his 2005 work, Mass Communication Theory, he says that the belief that ownership ultimately determines the nature of media is not just a Marxist theory, but virtually a common sense axiom. And also, he said that the content of media always reflects the interests of those who finance them. Why this theory? One, I think that this theory is more suitable to this study, in that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines there's plurality of ownership, and also it is a democratic country. So the two main elements are present in this sample, and therefore I think this theory qualifies for application in this particular context. And secondly, the theory offers opportunities to build on and contrast with previous studies on the topic and the sample. In terms of the methodology, I'm proposing to use personal interviews, and these personal interviews would use unstructured, broad questions that would be tailored specifically depending on the interviewee. And personal interviews that use unstructured questions, they are a flexible way of obtaining information. They allow the researcher to develop rapport with the interviewee, and this could lead to more flexible responses to sensitive questions. Previous work on this topic. Like I said before, I consider it part of my civic duty to contribute to the body of knowledge in and about my country. And this is emphasized by the fact that on this topic, there has only been one work so far, and that was in 2003 by Barber, who worked extensively in radio in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and is now a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, which is the premier tertiary institution in the English-speaking Caribbean. And Barber's work was a paper entitled The Unplanned Baby, Liberalized Radio Broadcasting in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the paper analyzes the impact of this liberalization, the liberalization of the radio industry, on several key areas of the industry and the society, which I've detailed in the document that I gave to you. And her methodology was pretty much critical analysis. The main finding of Barber's work was that the proliferation of radio broadcasting in SVG has had contradictory influence on national identity and the awareness of Vincentians. In terms of my study differs from Barber's in several important respects. Firstly, it focuses exclusively on the impact of radio liberalization on democracy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. My methods, they offer more opportunities to focus in on and gain a greater appreciation of the issues that inform the realities as they are. And it draws on the expertise of people who are trained in the media, who use the media frequently, or who are intimately aware of its development, or people who have a combination of these criteria. The limitations of my study, however, are that the data draws from analysts rather than consumers. Secondly, excuse me, if quantitative data was used, there's a possibility that the study would yield different results. And while the research is contextualized, it focuses on St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but it is conducted within the context of the Caribbean realities, the Caribbean civilizations, which are detailed in my document. The findings might not be generalized regionally, in that the situational circumstances, the use and consumption of the media might vary from country to country across the region. And this study does not seek to understand the overall impact of media on democracy, but what it does, it tries to understand comprehensively the impact of the liberalized radio on democracy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. What are the possible findings? The first is that ownership is not the strongest influence on media content as the theory proposes. In terms of choice, there's a possibility that the research would find that choice is but a facade. There's a possibility that the research would find that there's no significant positive impact of liberalized radio on democracy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that there's significant negative impact on democracy, or that the potential for what the theory says exists, but it is yet to be realized. Essentially, that is a synopsis of what I have presented to you, and that is my presentation. I want to thank you very much, and I now welcome your feedback.